Okay, let's talk about domain and range and how to find it on a graph. So first off, domain those are all your x values. And remember, those are your input values. And then range, those are your y values, and those are your output values. So we have two different types of graphs that we are going to look at. We have discrete functions, and then we have continuous functions. Discrete functions are functions that are not connected. They are individual points. And if you look at number 1, that is a discrete function. And so if you notice, the individual points are not connected. And so you should have two different color highlighters. So I've got yellow and purple. And we are going to find the domain and range for discrete functions like number 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first color, so yellow, and I'm going to highlight domain in yellow. And what I want to do is I'm going to basically crop my function, much like you would crop a picture, for example, or a selfie for all of y'all that love to take so many selfies. And when I look at domain, remember I want to look at my x values. So on this one, I'm going to highlight my x value in yellow, okay? And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to overlap any of my yellow with yellow, or sorry, yellow and purple together. So I'm going to highlight the outermost border with yellow. So right here, I'm going to go left to right. And so I'm going to outline that furthest most point, and I'm going to box it with yellow. Okay, and then I'm going to do the farthest right with yellow as well. Okay, so I am basically boxing in my function on this one. But the difference with discrete is these are not connected. So discrete, I am going to basically do that for every single point, all right? So my first one, I want these in brackets because if I don't put them in brackets, they start to look like ordered pairs, okay? So my first one, the x value is at -3, so I'm just gonna write it down, okay? And then my next one, the x value for that is at 0, so I write it down. Okay, and then my next one right here is at 2. And then the next one is at 4. And I have just found the domain for this discrete function, and that is all of my x values. Okay, so it's all right there. All right, so for the range, I'm going to use purple. So these are my y values. So here are my y's. Okay, I want to look at all of my individual y values, all right? So I would do the same thing, but this time I'm going to go from the bottom to the top, okay? Again, these are individual points. So my first individual point is also at -3, so it's right here. So I'm going to write it down. These are a set value, it's a set solution. Okay, my next one is at 2, or I'm sorry, it's at 1. And then I also have 3, and then 3. And then there is my range for this discrete function. So you have domain and range. And then if you wanted to identify this as a function, it passes the vertical line test. So yes, this is a function. And there you go. So that was kind of a review. This one is a simple one, and you're gonna see on number 2, it is just as simple, but the crop technique works a lot better. And I'm actually gonna switch highlighters because that yellow one is actually running out. So let me go switch really quick. Okay, so this one is continuous because I have a curved line here. So I'm going to apply the same thing. I want to do my domain first, but on all of the ones that are continuous, I always want to start with my X, and then I'm going to use my inequalities. Just like that. They are always going to look like this. And then same thing for my Y. When we write our intervals for domain and range, you always use your inequality signs, and they are always going to be less than, so they are always going to look like this. So if you ever see an answer choice that does not look like this, then it is wrong. Okay, so again, we're going to start with domain. So I'm always going to work from left to right. So I'm going to start from the left, and I'm going to go on the very outside of my graph. And when I say graph, I am not talking about the coordinate grid. I am talking about the actual graph in this sense, the dark circle here. Okay, so just note that. Okay, and my outermost point that touches is right here. That is at -3. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down on the left-hand side. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing on my right-hand side. And I'm going to crop it. I'm going to box it in. And then if I look on the right-hand side, my outermost point that touches it is a +3. And so to make sure that we have our signs right, if you look, this is a closed point right here. It actually hits that point. So I'm going to put a line underneath my inequality sign. And then also on the right-hand side, it also hits. That is a actual point. It is closed. So I'm also going to put a line under that side. And I have just found the domain for this function, or this continuous. So let's go ahead and do the range. So I'm going to highlight it in a different color. I'm using purple. We are going to start from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to use the same process. I'm going to highlight on the bottom, right underneath it. And then I'm going to highlight on the top as close as I can. And so I have actually cropped in my graph. That way I have a good image of my domain and range. So if I look at it right here, the Y value is at -3. Okay, and then my Y value for the top of this is at 3. And then to make sure that I have my signs correct, this is hitting that line. It touches right on that smooth part of the circle, so it is going to have a line underneath it, and then also at the top it hits that smooth part of the graph, so it is also going to have a line underneath it. Okay, and then I have just handled the domain and range for this graph. And then if you also want to identify whether it's a function or not, you would do your vertical line test. And since it hits more than one time, this is not a function.